All right, folks. Here is our tier list put together by yours truly. We've got, what is this? Some of the flags got cut off. What the hell? I'm pretty sure this is Afghanistan, though. Yeah, maybe I can, maybe if I do landscape images. No crop. There we go. Here we go. Okay, I fixed it. We're good. Problems of making a tier list yourself. Also, it took me forever. So you all better enjoy this video and like it and share it and leave a comment. But this is the Socialist Republic of Afghanistan, I believe it was called. And why can't I move it now? Okay, there we go. I can't remember if that was the actual name, like Democratic Socialist Republic, maybe, something like that. The Socialist Afghan state was the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan. Okay, I thought it had Democratic in it. Yeah, Democratic Republic of Afghanistan. This was the government that the USSR invaded, and I use that term with heavy quotation marks. This was the government that the USSR invaded in order to protect and to help. And the reason that they did that was because they were at war with all of these right-wing jihadist extremist groups. This government was doing things like teaching women to read, launching literacy campaigns, and going out into the rural regions and teaching women to read, and really making a lot of advancements in terms of women's status within society, which was a heavily religious, Muslim society. And the right-wingers, that was used as like a huge issue to galvanize the right-wing Afghans against the communists, basically saying, look, they're teaching women to read. We have this hyper-reactionary fundamentalist interpretation of the Quran that says women shouldn't be going to school. They should be in the home, completely covered from head to toe in the hijab. And we're going to murder people and throw acid on the faces of women who do this. So they were really horrific jihadist groups. The main group that formed in opposition to the communists at this time was the Mujahideen, and Osama bin Laden was among their ranks at the time. And the US and the CIA dumped billions of dollars, an absurd amount of money and guns into the Mujahideen in order to destabilize this democratic socialist government. So the Soviet Union got involved to try and help and stabilize things, but they were this was late, like in the, I don't know if the Soviet Union even got involved till like the early 80s or late 70s. So the USSR was having their own problems back home, right? They were already on the path towards their eventual dissolution. So eventually they're like, we can't be wrapped up in this thing here. And they just dipped out, and the US-backed forces won. Actually, the Taliban ended up taking control after that, who weren't as vicious as some of the others, but the Mujahideen would splinter into groups like the ETIM that's terrorized the Xinjiang region in China, Al-Qaeda, and many other, notorious jihadist extremist groups. So these were all funded and propped up by the U.S., including Osama bin Laden, who, officially, at least, he was the mastermind behind 9/11. And it was a guy that the U.S. was dumping money and guns into for many years. So this government did a lot of good things. A lot of people in Afghanistan say that the time when the Soviets was there was the most hopeful time in their country, because there were, not only were the Soviets fighting militarily, but they were doing what they usually did, building all these hospitals, building infrastructure, building like water irrigation and piping, building schools. So the standard of life at the time looked like it was going to increase for Afghanistan, and then it ended up just being taken over by these US-backed terrorists, which is so disgusting. But the government was based, right? Socialist Afghanistan was based. It shows us where Afghanistan could have gone, as compared to where they go now, or where they went now. It shows so perfectly how the US funds and props up right-wing jihadist extremism in the Muslim world in order to fight against left-wing politics from that region, which is so ironic considering we fought a whole ass war on terror against these jihadist groups who were splinters of the Mujahideen that we created. But obviously they collapsed. They weren't able to hold power, so that loses you points if you weren't able to maintain power, even if you had great ideals. So we'll put them in B. I'm going to be a little harsher for this one than I was for my leaders list. Albania. Hoxha. I kept saying Hoxha on the leaders tier list. I'll always say Hoxha. Albania, filled with bunkers. They had a pretty good and pretty independent socialist project, like we were talking about in the socialist leaders tier list. Hoxha was not only building a lot of bunkers in preparation for an eventual U.S. invasion, but he was out there calling everyone a revisionist. He was a hardliner. And he's like, we're going to go our own way. Obviously, like all of the Eastern Bloc communist countries and all of the countries or autonomous republics that were part of the USSR and Russia, Albania saw a massive increase in standard of life and education rates and healthcare access rates and all the things that socialism brings when you get rid of capitalism. So we'll put them in A. Chile under Salvador Allende. I kind of covered this in my other video doing a tier list of socialist leaders. Allende is going to go in C because while he did, I should have added an F. Can I do that? Is it too late? No, to say sorry. Oh well. It doesn't matter that much. Yeah, Chile, they were twice Allende was thwarted by US interventionism in elections. But then he eventually did win election, but he was absolutely against doing anything that would have gotten him portrayed or accused of authoritarianism, of being an authoritarian, right? He didn't want to crack down on these right-wingers. Like at first, I can't remember the name of the people. It wasn't Pinochet at first that the U.S. was backing, but then eventually Pinochet showed himself to be willing to basically do anything, commit any act of violence in order to overthrow the socialists. So the U.S. backed him, and he was this horrific fascist dictator of Chile after they killed Allende. But Fidel was warning Allende, you got to crack down on these people. You got to get control of your own military. There are these people like Pinochet that the U.S. is going to fund to kill you. Take it from me. I've thwarted 500 assassination attempts. But Allende, like I said, was averse to doing anything that would have gotten him accused of authoritarianism by the Western press, even though they still accused him of authoritarianism and rigging the elections and all this bullshit. And after he was elected, Richard Nixon famously said, make the economy scream, which is why Chile is a good example for us of how democratic socialism doesn't work. I actually learned recently from one of Haz's streams that Allende was also being backed by Soviet revisionists and reformists in Russia, which is very interesting. But there's many things that we can learn from this because it shows us the failures of democratic socialism. It shows us the need for so-called authoritarianism when it's the authority of the working class, the authority of the masses of your country being asserted over these murderous bastards like Pinochet. Right? That's not a bad kind of authoritarianism. That's a good kind of authority. And that's what Allende was averse to. So it's a great microcosm of the failures of democratic socialism. But it's also very it's very interesting that or also, sorry, not as very interesting. Not Cuba. Geez, I'm all over the place. Chile also gets points for Project Cybersyn. They also get extra points for Project Cybersyn because they were developing this computer programming, or I don't know if you'd call it programming technology, but this computer technology that helped them more efficiently plan the economy. Like the Soviets, and at least in the early years, they were doing all that shit on pen and paper, and they still managed to do an amazing job. But they had to have a bunch of math geeks, planning everything out, whereas Project Cybersyn had those math geeks working on a computer program, which Paul Cockshott talks about this a lot because he's a programmer or software engineer or something, so he knows that world that I don't. So he wrote about it and basically how planning technology has developed since Project Cybersyn, and nowadays you could very easily plan a socialist economy. The ECP, the economic calculation problem, is complete bullshit. Cybersyn dope as F. Yeah. Yeah, they get points for that. Actually, if I put Afghanistan in B because they fell, I should probably also put him there. But the difference between these two is that I believe the Afghanistan revolution, it wasn't Marxist-Leninist maybe, but they allied directly with the Soviets, right? And it was more militant. They were on the ground fighting like they would if they were Marxist-Leninists. You know, they were fighting against these jihadists, which forced them to become more radical and revolutionary and take this Marxist-Leninist position of self-defense and asserting the authority of the proletariat that Chile never took. Note, CIA Mujahideen splinter groups have gone on to fight U.S. adversaries almost exclusively. Americans should question the war on terror narrative. Thank you very much, Marco, for the $5 super chat and the excellent comment. Absolutely. Very rarely, if ever, have ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, the ETIM, any of these fronts attacked the U.S. or Israel or their allies. They almost always attack Iran or Syria when they were under Assad, or China, socialist China. It's as bad as ISIS actually launched an attack that landed in Israeli territory and maybe killed some Israelis. They miscalculated and launched the missile to the wrong spot. And ISIS came out and apologized to Israel and said, "We're sorry, Israel." And Israel said, "Oh, it's all good." You know, even though they literally launched a genocide in response to October 7th when some of their people got killed by ISIS. They were like, "It's all good, guys. We know you're on our side." So yeah, the war on terror was complete nonsense. That's why it's such nonsense. It's these groups that we propped up that are our proxies that we said we were invading to take out when actually we were invading to take out more of our enemies in that region. And Israeli officials, I've tweeted this before, and Max Blumenthal has written about it in The Management of Savagery, his book. Israeli officials openly said that they see Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra as a potential strategic ally in Syria. Right, so they've gone as far as to come out and basically just say this. And now, you know, the current government of Syria is basically Al-Qaeda. It's an Al-Qaeda splinter. So yeah, thank you very much, Margot. Angola. I don't know very much about Angola. I just know I love their flag. This is one of my favorite socialist flags in existence. I'm pretty sure they moved away from Marxism-Leninism. Like, they're still a socialist republic to this day, and sovereign. But I think they abandoned Marxism-Leninism, which loses them some big points. So we'll put them with... I don't know. I don't know enough about them whether to put them in C or B. I know that the Cubans were funding them when they were having their civil war for independence. Are we counting Angola 1975 through present or 75 through 92? Exactly. I think it's 92 when they abandoned Marxism-Leninism, right? So I think if we're talking 75 through present, if you're talking 75 through 92, then you got to put them in B. I think if you're talking 74 through present, then you got to put them in C because of the Marxism-Leninism debacle. NAMBLA was a Fed psyop. Where'd that come from? But I agree. And there were Trotskyite organizations who openly supported it. Freaking Trot moment. Okay, which one of these is Azerbaijan and which one's Armenia? I had to throw these on there. Okay, this one's Armenia. I had to throw these on there because I think it's very interesting. They weren't socialist countries all on their own. They did have revolutions that were largely aided by the Soviets. Maybe a little bit of Soviet social imperialism, but whatever. It's all good. I wish China would do a little bit of social imperialism in the U.S. Anyways. But Armenia and Azerbaijan absolutely exploded after the Soviet Union was created and they became a part of it and the communists were able to take control of the government. Economically, they exploded. The increase in standard of life there was unreal. And the reason for that is they had a bunch of, I can't remember if it was oil or natural gas, but energy resources underneath their soil that they were never able to exploit and use. And when they joined the Soviet Union, Russia and the other countries gave them the tools that they needed to start exploiting these resources and to industrialize. So they were able to harness all of these resources and get incredibly wealthy after the USSR was created. Oops, dropped my phone. After the USSR was created and after they became a part of it. And currently, if you know anything about Armenia and Azerbaijan, gosh, I hate these ads. I wish these could go away. But if you know anything about Armenia and Azerbaijan, you know that they're at war. They're fighting over the Nagorno-Karabakh region, which most left-wing people think Armenia has more of a claim to than Azerbaijan. The population is majority Armenian. But they've been in conflict over this Nagorno-Karabakh region for many, many years, including when the Soviet Union was around. So what did the Soviets do? What did those crazy, evil socialists do? They made it autonomous. They made it an oblast. They said this little region here that they're fighting over will basically be independent, and both Azerbaijanis and Armenian people will be respected here and will have their rights here, and they'll have their own little administration that can basically govern this region that'll be made up of both Armenians and Azerbaijani people. So it was a great solution to the conflict, a partial solution. There was still fighting over it. But, still a much better solution than what we see today, where as soon as the USSR fell apart, the two countries went to a full-out war over the region. And then again, recently, within like the last 5-6 years, the war kicked up again, and Azerbaijanis have just been shelling these Armenians, including Armenian civilians. It's really horrible. And the Armenians are fighting back too, and they've hit civilians and stuff as well, but it's pretty disproportionate. The Azerbaijanis are doing a lot more damage, and I think are just more militarily equipped. But this region, ever since 1991 or 1992, when the first war kicked off, has been a war zone. It's been a tragedy. And again, like, this goes back to, has socialism really failed every time it's tried? Has it really? When under capitalism, these two countries are at war with civilians being shelled and a bunch of people are living in poverty and in a war-torn area. When under socialism, they got massively fucking rich extremely quick. Like, obviously socialism was better for them. Or what are we talking about here? This is an example of capitalism failing every time it's tried. It's just so absurd. So anyways, A. Who was Lysenko in the USSR? Lysenko was a biologist, or maybe a geneticist, you could call him, who critiqued the Western dogmas of genes and the little Punnett squares that they have you draw in high school. He basically said that it was pure idealism. It was an abstraction that wasn't actually proved in practice through the scientific method. And now we're seeing with epigenetic theory, new genetic theory, which says that basically your actions and your environment now can change the genes that you pass on to your kids, the genetic tendencies that you pass on to your kids. Like, if you drink more, you could pass that on to your kid. So Lysenko and another guy named Lamarck, what's called Lamarckism, their theory has been proven more and more correct. He wasn't right about everything. I'm not a science expert, so I can't dissect it super well for you. But yeah, he basically predicted what's now become epigenetic theory like hundreds of years ago. And he gets blamed, not hundreds of years ago, like 100 years ago. And he gets blamed for the Holodomor, the famine that happened due to natural causes in Ukraine. But that's just propaganda. That's just bullshit nonsense. There were some mistakes made in collectivization. I think he was an agronomist. I think that's what you would call him. He worked with the soil and planting food, which the Soviet Union vastly increased throughout their country, or throughout the various countries. So clearly he was somewhat good at it. Yeah, vindicate Lysenko. I did a video on him a while back. I'm not a science guy, so it's hard for me to talk about something that I don't have like years of research in, like politics and history, or economics. But yeah. This is Bolivia, correct? Is this the Bolivian flag? Bolivia under Evo Morales doing what I would basically call resource socialism. Not trying to really revamp any, they're not doing a cultural revolution, but they're nationalizing important resources like the coca leaf and like the lithium industry, which really pissed off Elon Musk, who openly supported the coup of Evo Morales. There's some unfortunate infighting going on right now between Luis Arce, who took over after Morales, and Evo Morales, even though they're both part of the MAS party, the Movement for Socialism party. But either way, I support that party wholeheartedly, and they're doing a good job. Evo Morales comes from the trade unions, obviously. They're drawing upon real working class organization in order to try and take an electoral path to moving towards socialism. The U.S. coup against them was absurd. It was just a straight up like old school CIA fascist coup. They put this fascist witch named Janine Áñez in power, who had, I believe, 13% support among the Bolivian people. So talk about supporting freedom and democracy, am I right? But then Luis Arce won the next elections. So the Movement for Socialism was put back in power. Evo Morales returned to the country from where he was in exile. And now there's that infighting that I talked about. And it remains to be seen what will happen. But I will put them in B, because even though they're like an electoral form of socialism and stuff, they're at least still around, unlike Chile. They're still doing the damn thing. So I don't know if that's right or not, but that's what we'll go with. The hell is this flag? Can someone tell me what this one is? Do you guys see it? Can someone look that up for me? Or someone just tell me this one? I can't tell what that is. Bulgaria? Okay. Thank you. I don't know much about Bulgaria. We'll put them in A, because they were Marxist-Leninist. Central Asia. I just lumped all of these together because you had all these autonomous Soviet republics like Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, all in Central Asia, and they all had a similar story. One of them, which one's the biggest? Sorry, I get that region confused. Oh, my map of Asia fell too. One sec. Kazakhstan is the big one. In Kazakhstan, especially, this is true of a lot of these regions, but in Kazakhstan especially, they didn't even have like feudalism. They had like a nomadic society where people would like travel on horseback all around. The population of Kazakhstan is like the same as the population of Maine, and it's this giant ass country. So maybe the most difficult country or Soviet autonomous republic to build socialism in. Because the people's lifestyle was not conducive to working jobs and industrializing and building up the country into a modern country. They were like nomadic warrior people. That being said, there were, they taught everyone to read. They brought them electricity. They brought them a lot of industrialization. Socialism helped the countries, all the countries there, advance a lot. It was a very difficult process of building socialism because, as Marx explains, the more developed one mode of production is, the more that it sets the stage for the next mode of production. The more that capitalism develops, the more it creates the conditions for the possibility of socialism. And in these countries, they didn't have that development. They kind of had to just level skip right to socialism. So very interesting stuff to research there. Soviet nostalgia is pretty high in a lot of these regions too. Not every country. Some countries don't. A couple of them, I can't remember which ones, but a couple of them kept their central economic planning, their socialist style economic systems after the collapse of the USSR. And I guess there's just not enough resources there, and it's too far away for the US empire to really give a shit. So we'll put them with the other Soviet autonomous republics and Eastern Bloc countries in A. It's the settlers flag, Eddie. Come on. The J. Sakai settlers flag? Aren't all flags settler flags? Right? Isn't Marxism when we just support racial minorities, killing whatever the racial majority is and making them move to a different country? Isn't that Marxism? So technically every flag is a flag of the settler. Thank you, Long Guy, for the third super chat of the day. You're killing it, man. Thoughts on Nirvana's MTV Unplugged? What the hell does that have to do with anything? Thank you, you dick Seuss. I appreciate the $2 super chat, brother. You guys are killing it today with those. I like that performance. It's a great performance. Haunting, because Kurt Cobain died shortly after. I do know what you're talking about. I just don't understand what it has to do with the subject. The Republic of Cuba. Is that the actual name of Cuba? Is that the official name? Oh, yeah, it is. Okay, I didn't even know that. Anyway, it's the Republic of Cuba. Amazing country. The countries that are going to go in S tier are the existing Marxist-Leninist countries. The Marxist-Leninist countries that are still around today, that survived the fall of the USSR. In Cuba, that was called the special period in the 90s when they had to sacrifice because they no longer had their largest trade partner buying up all of their sugar so that they could invest it in other parts of their economy. And amazingly, and thanks to the charisma of Fidel and the courage and conviction of the Cuban people, they were able to survive that. And they're doing a little bit better to this day. They're still being choked under the blockade. But it's quite amazing to think about because there aren't many socialist countries in the West. A lot of communist socialist countries are in the East. So Vietnam, Laos, China, and the DPRK are all very close to each other. They have each other as trade partners. Cuba doesn't have that. Think about where Cuba is. It's a few miles away from frickin' Miami. Not only is it in the Western Hemisphere, far away from other socialist trade partners, but it is right under the nose of the U.S. empire, the head honcho of capitalist imperialism for the last 70 plus years. And they have survived despite every single effort possible from the US to overthrow and destroy and crush and strangle and suffocate their socialist project. So the people of Cuba are absolutely heroic. They're a bastion of freedom, not just in the Caribbean, but the entire world. The very fact that Cuba is still Marxist-Leninist today, despite everything that they've faced, the fact that they still have a socialist project that gives their people better health care and housing and basic necessities of life than even the US does, is just a miracle and a testament to how amazing their people are. So viva Che, viva Fidel, viva Cuba. Venezuela is pretty close. That's the only one, but they're not Marxist-Leninist. They're not Marxist-Leninist like the other countries I mentioned, but yes. They've always been very tight with Venezuela, and Venezuela and Cuba are viewed as like the scary communist countries in Latin America. Like Gabriel Boric, the democratically elected socialist who's not a socialist in Chile, he was like, I'm a socialist, but not like Cuba and Venezuela. It's like that. They're like the ones in Latin America that Bernie Sanders style politicians point to and say, I'm a socialist, but not like that. Those guys kill people. DPRK. Same thing I said about Cuba, except they also have the small advantage of sharing a border with China. But amazing revolutionary struggle to read about. Kim Il-sung was an amazing leader. Have fought off the U.S. empire at every turn, had 20% of their population killed in the Korean War, who managed to win anyways and continue fighting. And they've had the second most stringent sanction regime on them ever since that war ended, second only to the embargo on Cuba. So they're all being absolutely strangled by the U.S. financial system and the U.S. military, the only country on earth that doesn't belong at all to the IMF and World Bank. So I've talked forever about the DPRK. I won't bore you guys, my normal audience, by ranting on and on. But for those of you who are watching this who are new to my channel, check out my playlist on the DPRK. I have a full playlist. It's one of the topics I've covered the most extensively. And I have videos like recommending good movies to watch about the DPRK to start learning them. And all you really need to know, the last thing I'll say, is that U.S. propaganda demonizes someone more the more that they support freedom and fight against U.S. imperialism. The more you fight against U.S. imperialism, the more of a monster that the U.S. media will make you, or the corporate media, not just the U.S. media, the corporate media. And the reason the DPRK has been made into such a monster in the American mind is because they've done so much and fought so heroically against U.S. imperialism and done so much to build socialism in their country and try to improve life for their people in their own way without just caving like South Korea and becoming a puppet of the U.S., although they were occupied and the U.S. forced that fate upon them by murdering every single communist or left-wing leaning person in the southern part of the country. So yeah, check out my DPRK playlist for more. I know some people might be scared of that. Oh boy, we got Hughie Lee in the chat. Huey, I was wondering the other day, I'm like, where's that guy been? Where's my Vietnamese bro been? This is, and now you choose to come back when I'm about to talk about socialist Vietnam. Me and Huey are gonna be throwing fists by the end of this. Which one is this? Actually, is that Chile? I've been studying and working, dude. Yeah, I feel you. No, it's not Chile. I feel you. No worries. I was just wondering where you were because nobody had been dooming and glooming about Vietnamese socialism in the chat. So I'm like, where's our boy? That's Czech. Okay, I don't know shit about them. I don't even know why I put them on the list. There you go. Put them in B. They don't get to be with the other republics. I don't know why. If I'm wrong and they deserve to be with the other Soviet republics and Eastern Bloc countries, tell me why. Please tell me in the chat because I don't know shit about them. All right. The People's Republic of China. I put that on there twice. We'll use this one. Obviously, the leading socialist country in the world today. The new USSR that's not the USSR. The Mao era was based, the Deng era was based, the Xi era was based. Every era of China's history was based. They're constantly evolving and changing based on and adapting based on changing conditions around them, adapting based upon the strategy of the US empire when it comes to destroying them. And what they've been able to do in terms of poverty alleviation is just insane. 75% of all global poverty reduction over the last decade has been directly a result of China's efforts. They've lifted their entire country out of poverty. Oh my gosh, stop calling me. Hold on, let me put this on Do Not Disturb. They've lifted their entire country out of poverty. What they've been able to do in terms of industrialization and bringing people health care and all the necessities of life is amazing. They've become a modern economic superpower when they were a backwards, agrarian, feudal country less than 100 years ago. Less than 100 years ago, they were semi-feudal, if not, almost fully feudal. And now they're the world's fastest growing economy, soon to be, the world's far and away most dominant economy. And they're not funding revolutions all around the world like the Soviet Union's doing, but they're lending a hand economically. They're building up all of these countries in Africa and all of these trade partners around the world with their policy of non-interventionism and mutual development. So shout out to China. The other thing about China that I feel obligated to point out before we move on, China has many different ethnicities, nationalities, racial groups, religious groups, and all of them are united under one banner. The banner of a socialist republic, the People's Republic of China. The Uyghurs see themselves as part of that. The Han people see themselves as part of that. The people in Tibet see themselves as part of the PRC. They're united. And if you look at what's happening in the Middle East lately, a place where the borders were largely drawn by Western colonial powers, a place where they had a pan-Arabist ideology that was never able to come to fruition. Nasser and other leaders wanted to unite all of the Arab countries into one strong country defending against imperialism. Iran is a lot like that. Iran's very big, and it encompasses many ethnic and religious groups, and that's the reason they are now leading the fight against the Zionist entity, because they're big and strong, and it helps to be big and strong when you're fighting a war against imperialists who want to kill you. And so we see that Mao and the Communist Party of China was able to unite all of these people into one collective thing, into one sovereign state, into one people who view themselves under one banner. And this is what we want to do and feel still needs to be done in the United States, by the way, uniting all the different racial, ethnic, and religious groups the way that our, the original American Revolution set out to in many ways. Although the founders, of course, were hypocritical in their actions. But either way, it just shows the U.S. media loves to demonize these big countries like the USSR or China. But those countries are uniting different religious and ethnic groups. And what the U.S. does to fight that is like what they did in Yugoslavia. They inflame racial hatred and try to get people to tear the country apart so that their racial group can have their own tiny little country instead. That's what they did with the ETIM and the jihadist extremist Mujahideen splinters in Xinjiang, China. Good job cooking Destiny. Thoughts on MAPK? Thank you very much, comrade. I haven't heard anyone talk about that debate in a while. Always good to reminisce. Destiny's an idiot. Although I got a few things wrong in that debate, and we can talk about that at a later date. Someone asked me sometime what I thought I got wrong in the debate with Destiny when we're not doing something like this. But what do you mean? I don't know what MAPK is. Like protein synthesis? Isn't it something like that? I'm not sure. If you let me know what it is, maybe I can answer. Thank you so much for a $2 super chat. What do we got next? China again. Move them to the bottom. Cambodia. And I even had to edit our boy on there, Pol Pot. Is there an S+ tier? How do I put this above China? How do I put this above everything? How do I put this above my own life? I'll give anything for Pol Pot. Just kidding. I'm not even going to rank Pol Pot because, obviously the normie move would be to put him in the D tier, but I don't know. I don't even think we can really know what happened in Cambodia at the time. Similar to Peru under the Shining Path, because I'm sure there was tons of, despite the very real crimes that Pol Pot committed, I'm not denying that there were very real crimes or that he wasn't, like a great Marxist-Leninist leader. Or I'm not saying he was some great Marxist-Leninist leader. But that being said, I'm sure the U.S. was making up propaganda about him when they were bombing Cambodia and stuff. Or did he was in power after? Some people actually think the CIA was propping up Pol Pot. I don't know, but there was tons of U.S. propaganda about French Indochina at the time, and Henry Kissinger bombed them so bad. It's absolutely insane. He basically bombed every square foot of the country. And I'm sure a lot of those deaths got blamed on Pol Pot and got blamed on communism and the Black Book of Communism and these other piece of shit works of scholarship. So because they couldn't record as much, similar to Peru under the Shining Path, because the productive forces weren't that developed, and there weren't video cameras and stuff, we don't actually have that much information about it at the time. It was just a agrarian country being carpet bombed constantly by the U.S. I don't even feel that we have enough information to say much about Pol Pot. But yeah, I would rank him extremely low if I was going to rank him. We'll just leave him there in D.